I'm Richard RJ Eskow of the Zero Hour for Free Speech TV, and here at Netroots Nation, I am sitting with Brian Young. Brian is the Executive Director of Action Network, which has a number of tools for the movement. Tools I use, for example, for the Zero Hour for our email and other organizing activities. So I wanted to talk to him a little bit about what they're up to. Brian, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. And so, first of all, let's start with this. A lot of people don't know this, but there's sometimes controversy in the movement world because you have vendors who come in and are providers of certain services. People feel they should be part of the movement. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Where do you guys fit on that spectrum?
We are definitely on the part of the movement spectrum, both as people and as an organization. I was John Kerry's digital director when I started Action Network, and one of the real focuses we had was how to align incentives, because that's really what's the important part here, so that everything we do aligns both in the short term and in the long term with the movement. Because it's hard sometimes to both stay mission focused and keep the development resources flowing. So we are a nonprofit. All of our tools are owned by our nonprofit, and we create, originally with the AFL-CIO, they were our initial partner in creating essentially a co-op around the Action Network toolset, and it's Daily Kos, AFL-CIO, and us. And that co-op both collectively funds the core roadmap of development every year and collectively decides on what that roadmap is. So we're working with people who are using the tools all the time. And originally it was really about that mission that you were just mentioning, about being part of the movement and making sure that we were always kind of beholden to the movement. But it turns out, I didn't know what I was doing at the time when it comes to building software, and it turns out to be a really great way to build software for the movement and the tools for the movement, because by constantly having conversations, we have monthly meetings with users within this committee and with all of our users, and they're not just advisory meetings, they're really decision-making meetings on what we're going to build, and that keeps us always constantly in touch with what people need in the movement, and that was the design of it. And we designed it to be that way for perpetuity, because we can't be bought, we don't have venture capital, we can't get private equity buyout because of the way we're structured, and that's deliberate.
So, and this gets to the question of when users help you shape and craft a product. And I used to be in the tech world a long time ago. It becomes a collaborative effort, much like a movement is a collaborative effort. So that's why sometimes the sensitivity, if it's a for-profit venture and the movement expertise and experience is used to craft it, then maybe it goes to extreme right-wingers or whomever. There's some discomfort with that, but also I would imagine that means not only shaping each tool a certain way, but kind of figuring out what tools you want to build next.
Absolutely.
So where are you guys with that?
Yeah, it's a great point, because one of the first things we ever built was actually a distributed events tool before we built the whole email tool set. This is in 2012. And it was, do you remember the Black Friday strikes and protests against Walmart in 2012? That was our sort of launch event, because we worked with them being the campaign, Making Change at Walmart, part of UFCW. They knew they wanted to do something around Black Friday, and we had this idea of distributed events, so you could go to a website, put in your zip code, find the local event, if there was one, host your own, something we do all the time as a movement, but at that time it was a new thing. And that was really in conversation with them about what they needed and what we were thinking of, so it was very sort of tight collaboration around innovation, but grounded in practice. And partially because we started from that place of distributed events, people used us a lot at the local level. And we also have a free version of our tools, and our minimum is only $10, so we really focus on empowering grassroots. And people were starting to use our tools, which I consider for mobilization. Our tools are built for mobilization, our tools Action Network, and kind of as a movement. And when I say mobilization, it's a lot around capturing the energy of the moment and trying to convert that into useful action. Donate, go to an event, vote, all these kind of capture that energy. What that isn't really, and we use the term sometimes digital organizing, but I come from an organizing background.
Right.
And we realized that people are trying to use it for deeper organizing, sort of leadership development and tracking, kind of people over time in ways that mobilization isn't really good for. So first we looked for a tool set to integrate with because we don't have to build everything ourselves, and found there really wasn't a good tool set for organizing. So that, again, we partnered with AFL-CIO and People's Action to form that same committee approach to work with the practitioners to build the tools. And we built a tool set that's really focused on leadership development, really empowering leaders within communities to hold small-scale meetings, tracking relationships over time. Because that last point is critical. When you think about the technology, especially not just in the movement, but in the economy, in our society, that Silicon Valley model of technology, it views people as a digital profile.
Well, that's it. I wanted to get to that, but please go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, because it's an important point, I think, because that Silicon Valley model of digital profile, then you reach people with a message to get them to do something, buy shoes or whatever it is. In many ways, our mobilization technology has a similar mechanism to it, where we're building up sort of characteristics about people so we can reach them with the right message to, get them to do something. Our asks are more societally beneficial, but there's still a similar view of people. Whereas organizing, the real currency of organizing is a trusting relationship between two people in a community of trust. If you're going to sit at a lunch counter when people that look like you can't sit at that lunch counter, you need to have a network of trusted people around you to make you feel safe. Every major society-altering movement is based on that organizing principle of having trusting community. And a lot of our technology in our society now, social media gives the illusion of community, but it's not really about trusting relationships. So when we were building the organizing tool, we really realized that it was around that relationship and really having all kinds of ways of both fostering relationships in communities and connecting people, but also realizing that's the real power and ways that people can really activate networks of people, not in the social media sense, but in the classic sense of people, a real community who knows each other and trusts each other to do societally altering things. And we launched that tool about 3 months ago, and already it's starting to be used in unions, and we're working with some people around the census to really boost the response rates in some hard to count communities, these communities that are really, the outside information is sometimes not trusted for very good reasons, and really working within the community so that they can own the effort themselves. And through that, we'll be building up organizing infrastructure that then can be used for registering to vote and turn out later. So that's the other really big thing about organizing, is it builds infrastructure that pays off more and more and more over time.
Well, and that gets to, and underscores, I guess, a point I've been making for a long time, which is, I was pretty early in the blogging movement, and there was a part of that period when people were saying online is going to change politics and movement work. And I've always felt ultimately it's about the human experience and the human dimension and the physical world where people interact. And civil rights movement is a perfect example of that. And so taking the digital into the physical is, it sounds to me like that's what you're basically, that's the next phase of what you're doing. So for example, I use your tools to communicate to my readers who are on my newsletter or whatever, or my viewers and so on. But because I was part of People's Action for a while, but I'm not part of a movement group right now, or an activist group right now, but it sounds to me, so have you developed these tools, or are they in development, or where are they?
They were launched. Launching tools is just the first step. There's constant development to make them better, especially these organizing tools, because we'll be finding all new uses for them, because it's a whole new sort of paradigm of tool sets. And your point about taking the digital into the real world, online to offline sort of approach is definitely part of it. And the two things go hand in hand, the mobilization and the organizing. Because you think as a movement, we have mobilization moments, or your organization, we've all been this as campaigners. You have a moment when your issue, your organization just spikes. And as a country, we had a huge mobilization moment the last couple of years, and then it inevitably falls off, and then it spikes again, falls off, and you sort of kind of go like this. But the organizing is what happens when the mobilization starts to fall off. You pull people from your mobilization. A bunch of people come out to an event, a women's march, huge number of people, and then you can pull that into an organizing program, so then that's your base for your next mobilization, which is bigger than the previous one because you've built up that base, which feeds back into your organizing program. So you still have those ups and downs, but it's on an upslope. you're constantly sort of building power.
Right.
And that building power is what we're all about. And the Action Builder and Action Network, our two tool sets, will be integrated so you can run two programs that really feed into each other to sort of really raise that slope of power building in an infrastructure that will pay off.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. And last question before I let you go, just out of left field, which is, we're at Netroots and all that. When you look to the future, are you optimistic, pessimistic? Who knows? Or where are you at?
Well, I go both ways sometimes.
Okay.
I think
most of us. Right?
Yeah. It really, we say this often, but the next election really is critical.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And because there's a race on that I see. The left is building.
Right.
A lot. We're getting stronger and stronger, and I'm really optimistic about that, and about some of these things I've been talking about this really is a more focus on organizing, and a lot of community-based, the indivisible groups, swing lefts, all these groups that sprung up. There's a real power, and I work a lot with the Democratic sort of infrastructure and parties, state parties, and it really has kind of reformed from the kind of capillaries up. It's really, really optimistic. That's my optimism. And then the pessimism happens when I think what the right wing is doing to warp democracy and to tilt the playing field.
Right. And
then climate. All these things are in this sort of balance and race. And I feel like there's a very good chance we're going to get through the next election and everything is going to shift in a positive way. And we're going to elect a president with big ideas and a country that's ready for those big ideas, and we're going to do some fundamental reform and really get at some of these problems. And that's luckily the way I'm feeling right now.
Right.
Then other days I think, oh my God, we're going to lose and it's all doomed.
Well, because of the billionaires, Robert Mercer's and so on, funding, so much. But yeah, I choose to feel exactly the way you do, which is optimistic. But anyway, Brian Young, Executive Director of Action Network and Action Builder, pleasure.
Thank you. It's nice to talk to you.
Same here. And that's it. I'm Richard RJ Eskow for Free Speech TV.